Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. So when is a Swiss Army knockoff not a Swiss Army knockoff? Well, the short answer is when that knife happens to be a Swiss Buck. Yeah, at first glance you look at this and you go, man, that looks like a Swiss Army knife, but it's by Buck Knives, so it's obviously just another Swiss Army knockoff. But that is not the case, because the Swiss Buck knives were actually made by Wenger, a Swiss Army knife company. And these were actually made in Switzerland under contract for Buck Knives. And they are a little bit different than the regular Wenger knives. Now, these were made between 1981 and 1989. And like I said, they were made by the Wenger factory in Delamont, Switzerland. Let's see there, Delamont, Switzerland. Stainless and Wenger there with the crossbow, and then on the back side there's nothing there other than the Buck logo on both sides of the nylon handles with the ridges running in there for grip. And that's the way all of the Swiss Buck knives look. Now, they made several different versions of Swiss Buck knives. I only have this particular one. I'll get into details with it in a minute. And they had them in all different sizes. There were two in the Wenger 65 millimeter line, one in the 75 millimeter line, 9 in the 85 millimeter line. This is the 85 millimeter line. And then later still, they made 3 in the 120 millimeter line. And they all varied in the blade options and everything else. This particular one is the Swiss Buck SideKick, and it later became the Swiss Advantage, the same knife. They changed the name sometime in the process of making them between 81 and 89. So the first ones made would have been known as the SideKick. The last ones made would have been known as the Swiss Advantage. For the most part, most of the knives kept the same name throughout the line, but 2 or 3 of them had the name change in the process. And what you have with this knife is all the blades that you see on your typical Wenger Swiss Army knife. So you have their style of can opener going on. You have the patented cap lifter screwdriver that they have, and that the reason it's patented is because if you push down, the screwdriver will lock and it will not move, and once you release pressure, then it will unlock. And you see there, patent, and it has that little bit of locking feel go for it. This particular one, because this is the Swiss Advantage or the SideKick, it has the nail file. This knife is basically the same knife that you find in the Wenger Traveler line, or the Wenger, in the Wenger lineup it would be known as the Traveler because it has the nail file. In current day, this would be the equivalent of the Evo 14 with the funky scales on it, because besides the clip blade you have here, it also has running down the center a pair of scissors. And it's your typical patented scissors from Wenger. Notice it's got the lever going on there. See the patent mark? And if you notice, if we can look closely, might have to show it somewhere else. But yeah, it's serrated scissors. They're called self-sharpening serrated scissors because the blades are slightly serrated and you feel them cut. Really good scissors. I like the scissors on the Wenger knives. But as you can see, this is pretty much the same as what you have here. This is, like I said, the Traveler. And same blades all along, with the exception of you have the spear blade versus a clip blade. And the reason that happened is because it was felt that the clip blade was more popular among Americans. And so Buck wanted a clip blade on their Swiss Buck knife. And that's why it ended up going that way. And the same with the handle design here. This is the handle and that clip blade are all Buck. Everything else on there, though, is basically your Wenger Traveler. And so, not a Swiss Army knockoff. This is the real deal. This is a genuine Swiss Army knife, the Swiss Buck. So if you can find one, it's a really cool one to grab. Like I mentioned, they were around from 81 to 89, so they are getting a little more scarce every day. Now, if I'm reading everything correctly, there were a total of 10 knives in the beginning. It was one 65 millimeter knife, one 75 millimeter knife, and then 8 85 millimeter knives in the Swiss Buck lineup. They would later add another 85 millimeter knife, so a total of 9 85 millimeter knives, one more 65 millimeter knife, and then finally they would also add 3 120 millimeter knives. And these were all different knives. You can check the SAC Wiki for all the information. I'll try and list the names on a slide, but I won't go through all the details on them. One of the more interesting things, though, is the ninth 85 millimeter knife that they added was I think it's called the Greenskeeper or something. It is a golf knife, and that one has a spear blade. Unlike all the other 85 millimeter knives, all that have a clip blade for the main blade. But the golf knife, for some reason, had a spear blade. The other thing is if SAC Wiki is correct, certain models of the 85 millimeter knives have toothpicks and tweezers. But as you can see here on the SideKick, there is no toothpick or tweezer. And they do list some of them as having a toothpick and tweezers and others without a toothpick and tweezer. I don't know if that's correct or not. I'm going to say that SAC Wiki knows what they're talking about. They've probably seen all the knives. I have not. The only one I've actually seen and held is the SideKick. But one thing of note about the SideKick or the Swiss Advantage here is this is the only 85 millimeter knife in the Swiss Buck lineup that has both the nail file and the corkscrew. All of the other knives, well, none of the other knives have this combination of the nail file and the corkscrew. There are a total of, out of the total of 9, there are 4 of them that have a nail file. Those being the Remedy, the SideKick, the Green Master, and the Globetrotter. They all have a nail file. And of the ones that have a corkscrew, you have the Trekker, the SideKick, and the Odyssey, which also became known as the Tailgater. So that's it when it comes to corkscrews. Only 3 of the 9 managed to get a corkscrew on it. Obviously, they felt that the corkscrew did not sell as well in the United States, which is probably true. But also what was interesting is of the first 8 to come out, only 3 of them had a nail file. And once they added the Green Master, they also gave it a nail file, but they did not give it a corkscrew. So the SideKick is unique among the Swiss Buck knives of being the only Swiss Buck knife that came officially with the corkscrew and the nail file. So that's kind of interesting also, and maybe that's why I was drawn to it. Now, there might be some other ones out there that have a nail file and a corkscrew together. They might be parts knives that somebody created, or it might be that the SAC Wiki does not list every Swiss Buck knife that was made. But if the SAC Wiki is correct, then this is it. This is the only knife that has both the nail file and the corkscrew in the 85 millimeter frame. among the Swiss Buck knives. One final thing of note about the sidekick, and I don't know if it's just this sidekick or if it's all sidekicks, and I don't know if it's with every Swiss Buck that has a nail file, but on this particular one, and I did buy this one new, even though it was new old stock, I bought it new in a blister pack. If you notice there, and you see the scratches right there, that is blade rub being caused by the nail file making contact with the clip blade. Like I said, I don't know if this is something that happens on all of the Swiss Buck knives with a nail file, but what I can tell you is that on my Traveler, which has the spear blade and a nail file, I do not have the blade rub. And this is a relatively old one, but there's no blade rub going on, or I should say nail file rub going on with the Traveler, but I do have that with the Swiss Buck, and that might have to do with the changing out of blades, using a clip blade in this frame instead of the regular spear blade. Because the tolerance is very, very tight in this handle. It's not a major problem for me, but it is something that I noted. And like I said, I'm not sure if that has something to do with just this specific knife, or if it's all of the sidekicks, or if it's all of the Swiss Bucks that have a nail file with the clip blade. Because that is not a blade that is normally found on a Wenger knife. So swapping out the blade might have been what caused the blade rub, and that might be why there are so few models that have the nail file. Because you got to remember the the Green Master that came out, which has a nail file, still has the spear blade, and they might have caught that there was blade rub going on and said, screw it, we'll just keep it with the spear blade so we don't have the blade rub with the nail file. In any case, that's something else that I noticed. With that said, let's move on to some slides. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.